Hey everybody, welcome to the Conscious Love Show. Whether you are single, you are in a relationship, or you're healing a broken heart, this show is here to inspire you, to remind you how beautiful, lovable, and amazing you truly are, and to give you the practical tools and insights to navigate from wherever you are right now to the loving relationship that you so deeply want to have. My name is Shane Kohler. I'm a certified transformational coach and trainer with over a decade experience helping people release their trauma and open their hearts to love. I've delivered seminars all over the world, coached thousands of people through my online platforms and programs, and every week I'm coming straight to you with the hottest insights and the best teachers around, bringing you powerful resources and profound conversations to heal your relationship with love, dating, and yourself. I'm so grateful you're here, and if it's your first time, welcome. You can count on me to always show up for you with my very best and a commitment to learn and grow myself so I can serve you to my maximum ability. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. I've got some awesome things planned for you today. So without further ado, let's dive in. All right. Hello again, everyone. Hello. Welcome back to the Conscious Love Show. Shane Kohler with you today. Pleasure as always. Happy to be back and looking forward to diving in with you today. Today's episode, we're talking about why he pulls away when you start to care. And this is something that I think so many of the ladies out there have experienced maybe once, maybe multiple times. It's one of those moments that makes you go, what the fuck? We met, we connected, we were enjoying each other's company, we were building rapport, it was going well, and the moment I start to let myself get attached, he starts to pull away. And I just want to acknowledge, first of all, how maddening that can be, how frustrating that can be, how painful it can be, especially when it happens time and time again. And the moment you feel safe enough to open up, to trust, to let yourself feel something, to let yourself believe is often the very same moment that he starts to pull away, that he starts to distance himself. And I know, especially when this happens repeatedly, you can question everything. You can question, is this ever going to work out? Am I ever going to find someone? What's wrong with me? How come the moment I start to care, men tend to pull away? That can make you question yourself, can make you question men as a whole. It can make you question if you even want to keep trying. And so I just want to first acknowledge the reality of that and acknowledge the grief that's in that, because there is real grief in that. And what I hope to do in today's episode is explain some of the underlying reasons this happens and maybe things that you haven't realized or haven't thought about before, but I hope I can shed some insight into why this is happening. And also hopefully outline an approach that will cause it to happen less, or even when it does happen, that you will have a different experience of it. Because let me say this. Some men are available for commitment and some men are not. And I think we tend to have a certain cultural view of men, that men are non-committal, men are avoidant, men are emotionally withdrawn. And I'm not saying there's no truth in that. Like there are reasons we have those cultural assumptions, and it's because there are certain patterns that lead us to make those assumptions. So I'm not saying there's no truth in that, but I do think the truth is a little more nuanced than just saying men are this way. And the truth might be something closer to men have a baseline that causes them to be more cautious around commitment than women. Women tend to be a little more commitment ready than men are in many instances. And I think that's real. I think that's a pattern, that's a trend that describes a lot of people. It doesn't describe every man or every woman, but there's a trend there that is real enough that we can name it. And I want to talk about some of the reasons for that today. But I think a truth about men is that men are more available for commitment than they might appear to be on the surface. And when a man is ready for commitment, or when he's available for commitment, there are certain conditions that make him feel safe to take that next step. There are certain conditions that allow him to surrender more fully into commitment. And there are certain conditions that make commitment feel like a threat. I think in many cases, the way that women approach commitment often trigger a man's threat detector. Her needs for commitment are often the very thing that make him want to withdraw from commitment. And I want to make a distinction here that doesn't mean he's not available for it. That just means that the way she approaches it often sets off alarm bells in his mind and has him start rethinking everything. And that's not her fault, but it's also not his fault. I think there's an inherent tension in the way that women approach commitment and the way that men approach commitment. And I think these two different approaches trigger each other. Successful partnerships are usually the partnerships that navigate this tension effectively. So let me just start by saying that. I want to repeat that if maybe it wasn't clear the first time I said it, but the way that women typically approach commitment and the way that men typically become available or ready for commitment, these are two distinct approaches. And often they set off alarm bells in each other. So his readiness, his availability, his pace tends to set off her alarm bells. And her attempt and her readiness and her pace tends to set off his alarm bells. And when both have alarm bells going off, and we shift from consciousness into reactivity, we shift from emotional availability into self-protection, connection collapses. And I don't think that that's inherently her fault. I don't think that it's inherently his fault. I don't think that one way is right and the other way is wrong. I think there are different approaches that trigger instinctual responses in each. And when we don't navigate this consciously, we tend to repeat patterns that lead to the collapse of connection over and over and over and over again. So what I don't want to do in today's episode is say that, the man's way is right and the woman's way is wrong, or the woman's way is right and the man's way is wrong. What I want to do is hopefully create understanding around both of these approaches and name a path towards commitment that is workable for both. Because that exists. And yes, when you get on social media and you read the comments, and social media now has become an echo chamber of our limiting beliefs, right? So if you feel rejected by men, you go on social media and you see all these women saying that men are awful and men are this and men are that and men don't commit and men are narcissists and men avoid and there's this echo chamber. And people have said this to me in my own comments recently, where it's like, if men aren't really like this, then why are there so many women having the same experience? And I'm like, well, there are a lot of women having that same experience. There are also a lot of women who are happily in relationships. But the difference is that the women who are happily in relationships are not blowing up the comments on social media. They're quietly living their lives in their relationship. The women who are frustrated and hurt and upset about their interactions with men are blowing up the comments on social media. And so it creates this echo chamber where we start to feel like our experience is the universal experience. And what I want to say from my work, working with real women every day, many of these women are getting into healthy relationships. Many of these women are healing patterns that have caused them to recreate these experiences over and over and over again. And I want to say there is a whole other world that is not the loud rage world that we see on social media. But there's a whole other world of people living in peaceful, happy relationships. And what I want to do in this episode is name some of the ways that we get there. So first, I want to name a really common tension that I know so many women are experiencing. And that tension is that you feel trapped between being honest about what you want and pushing a man away. So I want commitment, I want marriage, I want a family, I want a long-term relationship. And if you're honest about that, it pushes a man away. And you feel that you have to choose between being honest or let me hide what I want. Let me pretend I'm okay with something casual. Let me act like it's no big deal. And meanwhile, I feel like I'm dying inside while I'm trying to give him space to make up his mind and figure out what he wants. And I'm withholding all of my needs. And then ultimately, when I do this, he just loses respect for me anyway because I've never talked about what I need. And then he pulls away regardless. And most of the ladies out there have probably realized that neither of these approaches really work. When you come out of the gate and you say, I want this and I want that and I want commitment and you need to be ready, and that tends to feel like pressure to him and it tends to push him away. And when you try to withhold your needs or downplay your needs or act like you're okay with something you're not, that kills respect and reciprocation in the relationship. And that also pushes him away, or maybe doesn't push him away, it just doesn't draw him in. So let me name first that neither of these approaches work. And what I want to do in today's episode is name a middle way. A way that doesn't feel like pressure to his nervous system. A way that is an open invitation into a real connection, while at the same time doesn't require you withholding or hiding your needs. Now, I want to say that women and men, again, I'm talking about patterns and trends. I'm not talking about every single individual man or woman, but there's enough of a trend and enough of a pattern that we can name these things. And the feminine nervous system is oriented around safety. And so in the feminine nervous system, commitment feels like relief. It feels like structure. It feels like safety. It feels like finally I belong somewhere. Finally I'm chosen. Finally I'm loved. Finally I'm worthy. And because of this, because of the way that there's a combination of biological reality and there's an overlay of social conditioning. And this happens for men and women, but let me talk about what happens for women for a moment. If we look at evolutionary biology, there's a reality that a woman, this is less true in our modern world, but throughout history this has been extremely true, is that when a woman becomes pregnant, she is extremely vulnerable. And now, in today's world, we have women who are having babies without even a partner and raising children on their own. So like I said, it's not as true in our modern world. There are definite real exceptions to this in our modern world. But historically speaking, if we look at eons of biological evolution, a pregnant woman was extremely vulnerable. A woman with a child is maybe even more vulnerable. And she needed a partner. She needed a protector. She needed a provider so she could care for herself and for a child while someone else handled the external needs, providing shelter, providing food, providing structure and safety for her and her child to exist in. So this is biological, evolutionary wiring that lives in women. And even if it's not completely relevant in today's world, the last couple of decades don't erase eons of evolutionary biology. So there's something inherent in the feminine nervous system that seeks a man that seeks a partner to provide structure and safety. To a man's nervous system, commitment doesn't feel like relief, it feels like responsibility. So if we use the same evolutionary biology, a man on his own out in the wild, he's a hunter, he's more free, he experiences more freedom, more ability to go where he wants, to do what he wants. And when he takes on the commitment of a woman and ultimately a child, he is now significantly constrained. He can't move as freely as he did before. He has significant concerns that go beyond his own, right? So he's not just concerned about himself. What am I going to eat tonight? But what is my family going to eat tonight? Not where am I going to sleep, but where's my family going to sleep? So where the feminine nervous system is looking towards partnership and commitment as a safe refuge, which feels like relief to her nervous system. When a man looks at that same commitment, he feels responsibility. He feels, now I'm carrying so much more than myself. Now, I want to say that doesn't mean it's a burden, because partnership, family is maybe the most rewarding thing a man can experience. Like I'll say this as a married man who's now a father. You know, my partnership with my wife was the most rewarding thing in my life until my daughter was born. Now she's the most rewarding thing in my life. And my partnership with my wife is also still rewarding, right? But so it's incredibly rewarding. It's also an incredible amount of responsibility. And that is maybe one of the biggest differences, because when a woman meets a man, she's seeking safety, relief, and refuge. And he's experiencing a loss of freedom, a constriction, and a heaviness of responsibility. And that's a big mismatch in desire. And it doesn't make either of them wrong. So I want to be very clear about this. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with what the woman is needing. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with how the man is experiencing it. I'm saying on a surface level, initially, those needs are often mismatched. And I talked about the evolutionary biology of it, but let's also name the cultural overlay. How I think this is fundamentally rooted in human nature and in the evolution of humanity, which I've been speaking about. But then that basic evolutionary nature gets overlaid with cultural reinforcement. And so we have little girls who are given dolls, and when they're very young, they pretend to be mothers. Now, you could give a little girl a toy tractor and she could go play a different kind of game, but that's not what we taught little girls to do historically. Maybe now we're doing that more. But little girls have been conditioned from a young age to be wives and mothers. I mean, how many times have we seen little girls dress up in all white and rehearse their wedding when they're 3 or 4 years old, right? I mean, these are the games little girls are taught to play. And little boys, I've often talked about like how, little girls are given Barbies, little boys are given guns, and girls play relationship and boys play war. And this fundamental reinforcement that we start getting as children gets reinforced throughout our lives. And so the ultimate feminine value is safety and the ultimate masculine value is freedom. And then there are definitely toxic representations of this where men start to express freedom through conquest, and the amount of women you've slept with and the notches on your belt gives you social hierarchy among men. And that's really a distortion of what is a fundamental masculine drive, and the drive itself is not wrong, but the way it gets socially distorted is wrong. And what I'm getting at here, to sum it all up, is that this is deeply woven into the masculine psyche and the feminine psyche. Because we have fundamental biological drives that are overlaid with intense cultural programming. And by the time you reach adulthood and you're dating and you're looking for a relationship, these impressions have been deeply ingrained. And so now we have the tension I was talking about earlier, where a man meets a woman. She's looking to him for safety. She's looking to him for a place to belong. She's looking to him for structure. And the more she reaches out to him for that, he feels a constriction. He feels a loss of freedom. He feels a heaviness of responsibility. Now, I want to name part of the feminine shadow here. And I want to say this delicately because I don't want this to be offensive, but it's something that needs to be named. And this is where the toxic part of the feminine shows up. It's when she feels like she's entitled to a man's commitment. And that when a man doesn't want to commit, he's wrong. And so this is where, if we look at how it's being talked about in the culture right now, avoidant men are automatically, they become synonymous with narcissist, with asshole, with toxic. Avoidance is not narcissistic. Avoidance does not make somebody an asshole. Avoidance is not toxic. Avoidance is a protective response to a nervous system that feels under threat. And this is where the feminine is there's a toxic feminine narrative in the culture that avoidant men are toxic. No, avoidant men are not toxic. Now, that doesn't mean toxic things don't happen in a relationship between an anxious woman and an avoidant man, because they do. But that toxicity is usually occurring on both sides. And anxious behavior can be equally toxic to avoidant behavior. But in our culture, we frame anxious people, specifically anxious women, as helpless victims. And we frame avoidant men as narcissistic perpetrators. When in reality, what we have are two mismatched nervous systems, both trying to protect themselves from their own discomfort and their own fear, and they get involved with each other. And yeah, when they get involved with each other, it can get toxic. But that's not anybody's fault. Those are two unhealed nervous systems trying to love each other. And it doesn't always work gracefully. So the feminine shadow that I'm pointing out here is when she feels that she is entitled to a man's commitment and she's not honoring of the responsibility that he's taking on in that commitment. And that's a subtle form of disrespect. When he chooses to commit, that shouldn't feel like something she was owed. That should feel like a way that he is honoring her. It should actually create a sense of humility, a sense of gratitude. And this is the fundamental mismatch that's happening right now. Now, I want to go back to what I said about the position that so many women feel like they're in, where they have to either withhold their needs to try to keep a man or express their needs and push him away. And I want to talk about a middle path, because neither of those approaches work. And most of you out there, if you're listening to this, you've probably tried both approaches and they probably both failed. You tried withholding your needs and a man just took advantage of you. You tried speaking your needs and he said, whoa, that's too much, and he backed away. So there's a middle path here, and it's not being manipulative. It's not being inauthentic. It's honoring your truth while also honoring his freedom of choice. And this is the thing, and this is maybe the biggest misconception, because I've talked about this a lot. I've done posts on social media where I'll be like, tell a man on the first date exactly what you're looking for. And women will post in the comments, wow, that sounds like a lot of pressure. Pressure is not in what you say, it's in how you say it. It's in the energy behind it. Men don't automatically feel pressure because you have needs. Men feel pressure when they feel like they don't have the freedom to choose whether or not they want to meet your needs. That's where the pressure comes from. You see, pressure is not the result of hearing your needs. Pressure is the result of feeling like he needs to carry the weight of your expectation. And so, one of the biggest blind spots I see in the way that women approach men in dating is they want certainty immediately. So you go on a date with a man and this usually only happens when you really like him. It doesn't really ever happen with men you don't like. But when a woman goes out with a man and she's attracted to him, she feels the sexual polarity, she feels the charge, she feels drawn towards him. She starts wanting immediate certainty. Where is this going? And she wants to immediately put him into a category of, is this a lifetime partnership or am I wasting my time? And that is not the way real relationships unfold. I've seen couples who got married within 30 days. Every single one of them has gotten divorced. Now, I know somebody's going to post in the comments, well, I married my husband in 30 days and we've been together for 20 years. Like, okay, beautiful for you. You're the exception. You're not the rule. Okay, so yes, no matter what I say, there's going to be some exception to it. And I'm happy for you. If that's your truth, I'm happy for you. You got lucky. That's not the way it works for most people in reality. And here's what I'm going to say. Even if you got married in 30 days, you didn't bypass reality. You just jumped the gun a little bit. But if your relationship actually worked and it's actually conscious and it's actually healthy, and you didn't just resign to it over the years, then you had to do all the same work. You just did it within the context of a marriage. And you got lucky that you married someone you barely knew and they were actually available to do the work with you, because that's usually not the case. So this is what I want to say. Real relationships unfold over years, not weeks, not months. In the first year, in the first 12 months that you're with someone, if you're still in a, I'll call it a committed relationship, but it's not marriage level commitment. But if you're still in a committed relationship with someone after a year, here's what you can realistically know. There's enough real potential here for us to give this an honest shot. I think it was 4 years in with my wife before things got really real between us. 4 years in. And look, it wasn't easy before that. Our first 3 years, we were long distance. And then we moved in together. And right after we moved in together, COVID hit. And so we were long distance for 3 years, maximum space. Then we moved in together and we were in lockdown in the house together, minimum space. So we went from one extreme to the other. That was hard. So I'm not saying there was no challenge, but it was about 4, maybe 4.5 years in that my wife was diagnosed with cancer. That was the first time that our relationship was really, truly tested. And that was hard. Now, I'm not saying everybody has to go through something like that for the relationship to be real, but what I'm saying is the relationship I have with my wife today is not something that was defined even in our first couple years together. What was defined in our first couple years together was we have something here that's real enough to go all in with it. And we got married after about 3.5 years. We got engaged after about 2 years. If I look at everything that happened prior to us getting engaged, so the first 2 years of our relationship. Now, I'm not saying there wasn't commitment there. I mean, we were taking planes to see each other every few weeks, so we were definitely committed on a level. But this wasn't, you're my person, I'm going to spend my whole life with you commitment. This was, I think this is something worth genuinely exploring. And we both felt the same way about it. When I proposed to her 2 years in, that was the time when we made the decision, I think this is something that could last for a lifetime. And let's openly say that together. Let's make that public declaration in front of our friends. And let's go all in with this. So it was 2 years before we made the agreement to do that. It was 3.5 years before we actually did it. And then I'd say shit got real 4 years in. And now we just had a baby. Shit got real on a whole other level. Now, I'm not saying you have to follow that exact trajectory. Could people get there a little sooner than we did? Sure. Especially if you weren't long distance for 3 years. You might get there a little bit sooner. But what I'm pointing to here is this myth that when you go on a first date with someone, you can immediately categorize whether this is a lifetime thing or whether you're wasting your time with it. You can't know that within the first month. You can't know that within the first few dates. You can't even really know that within the first year. You know, getting into 1.5 years, 2 years, you can start to say, I think this is someone I could spend my life with. I think we've been through enough together. We've been through all 4 seasons together. We've learned about each other's ways. We've handled some conflict together. We've navigated boundaries and standards and expectations and time. And, you know, we've worked through how much time we're going to spend together, how much time we're going to spend apart. What are your needs? What are my needs? Needs for connection, needs for space. Like, we've been through enough of that to realistically believe that we could do this for the rest of our lives. And I think so many people, and let me say, like, men do this too sometimes. Like, sometimes men are very eager for commitment. So I'm not saying that it's only women who do it. Sometimes men do it too. I talk to a lot of women and they're like, you know, I've been out with a guy 3 times and he's already wanting to know, you know, if I want to marry him. And men do that too. And I guess I'm speaking to the women around this because there's a larger trend of women doing it than men doing it. And because of what I was talking about earlier, where the feminine nervous system is oriented towards safety. But I just want to say that it's not only women doing it, it's men doing it. And this principle applies whether it's a man or a woman doing it. The principle is you can't expect commitment from someone you just met. You can't expect someone to know what they want for the rest of their life when you've just met them. And trying to define that commitment so early on is what creates a sense of pressure. And what this really is, and so let me name the fear underneath it. The fear is, if I don't lock this down quickly, I'll waste my time and I'll end up alone. That's the fear. And so the whole attempt to lock it down, to have a sense of certainty and to define it so quickly is really risk management. It's I'm trying to control what this is so that I don't have to risk anything. And this is what I really want to address in today's episode. Love is risky. Love leads to heartbreak sometimes. That is unavoidable. If you want to fall in love, if you want to get married, if you want a lifetime partner, you are going to get your heart broken sometimes. That's not something going wrong in the system. That's not you failing. That is literally the path to love. The path to love includes heartbreak. It includes disappointment. It includes becoming emotionally invested in someone and being let down. That is not a risk you can manage. It's not something you can control your way out of. It's something you have to surrender to as a part of the journey. And when you try to accelerate clarity, when you try to extract reassurance, when you try to push the relationship into structure, that's control. Control creates withdrawal. See, I don't think men as a whole are commitment avoidant. I think men are resistant to say they want something that they don't know if they want yet. And I think when a woman shows up needing certainty about what the long term holds with someone that she's only been on a few dates with, or someone that she's only been seeing for a few months, and she's wanting certainty about what the rest of their life together is going to hold, he's not avoiding commitment. He's avoiding making a promise that he doesn't know he can keep. And in a sense, his withdrawal is driven by him not wanting to disappoint. He feels an expectation that he doesn't know he can live up to. He doesn't want to fail her. He doesn't really want to hurt her. He also, and this is where men could grow up a little bit in a lot of ways, and I'll acknowledge that. He's uncomfortable with communication. He's uncomfortable with clarity. He doesn't really have the language or the words. And yes, this is his learning curve that men need to get better at this. I'll openly admit that. Men need to improve this. But the reality is a lot of men are not emotionally attuned on a level where they know how to really talk about these things. And that's where the avoidance comes in. He doesn't know what to say. He doesn't know how to say it. He doesn't know how to make sense of these feelings. He feels a little guilt, a little shame, because he senses that she wants something that feels heavy to him and he can't promise that. And so how that shows up is withdrawal. How that shows up is avoidance. I'm not saying it's the perfect way to handle it. I'm also saying that doesn't make him a villain. And this is where, when a woman enters seeking safety, seeking reassurance, seeking belonging, there needs to be an awareness of how those needs register in a man's nervous system. I'm not saying those needs are invalid. I'm not saying those needs are unimportant. I'm not saying that she should abandon those needs. I'm saying that she needs to have a certain awareness of how those needs register in his nervous system. And she needs to recognize that what feels like relief to her feels like responsibility to him. And rather than feeling entitled to his commitment, she wants to recognize that it's actually the greatest honor and the greatest gift a man could ever offer a woman. And that should be humbling to a degree. that should inspire a sense of gratitude. And I think that's something that is largely missing in the relational field right now. When men feel confined to, you owe your commitment, and if you don't give it, you're an asshole, you're a narcissist, you're a fucked up avoidant, that's not going to inspire a man into commitment. That's going to push withdrawal. And that is, in many cases, the water that we're swimming in the dating field right now. Men are not being invited to step forward. They're being shamed and judged for not stepping forward. And when a man feels a sense of shame and judgment, that's not a life he's going to commit to. When he feels a sense of appreciation, of gratitude, that's a life that he will step into. So let me make this practical. I want to make this really practical because I've been philosophical here, and I think the philosophical foundation is important. But I want to talk about, what do you actually do with this? So let me map out a timeline a little bit. I've touched on it. And what I want to do is I want to map out a realistic timeline. And then I want to map out, how do we communicate along that timeline? So let's talk about first 30 days as an initial benchmark. And this is what I call the discovery phase. The first 30 days as an initial benchmark. What you can realistically establish in the first 30 days is that we are both open to a long-term connection. We are both viewing this as something more than just a casual thing. That's a realistic expectation within the first 30 days. To say that we see that real possibility with each other, that there's enough connection here, that we see that maybe this could be a long-term thing with each other. And the third thing is to say that we are interested enough in this relationship to make it exclusive. That doesn't necessarily mean you're my boyfriend, I'm your girlfriend. What that means is we're going to stop seeing other people. Maybe we pause our dating app profiles. Maybe we make a commitment to give this a real chance between us to continue seeing each other, to communicate openly about how we feel, and start considering this as more than just two people who are dating. So how do we talk about that? Well, I've often said for women, even on your dating app profile or even on a first date, say what you want. And that's something along the lines of, I just want to be honest with you. I'm not looking for something casual. I'm not looking to have a fling. I am looking for a long-term partnership. And I just want to know that if we continue seeing each other, that you're open to that same thing. That's not saying you have to be my person. That's not saying I need certainty about where this is going. It's not saying I need the lifetime answer right now. It's saying I know what I want. And I want to know that if we keep seeing each other, that you're open to the same thing. That is not threatening to a man's nervous system. That is very reasonable. And if a man treats you like that's pressure, if he tries to play it off like, oh, well, I don't know, that's a lot to ask right now, we just need to see, like, if he gives you any kind of response like that, that's your answer. And I think a lot of women are afraid to face that answer up front, so they don't say this up front. And that's a big mistake. Because if you don't say this up front, you are letting him assume that you're okay with something casual. So not only is it okay to say that up front, it's essential to say it up front. But the point is, I'm not saying I want you to be my lifetime person. I'm saying I want a lifetime partnership. And I want to know that if I keep giving you my time, if I keep giving you my attention, that you're open to the same thing. So that's the first 30 days. And maybe that's 6 weeks, maybe that's 60 days, depending on how often you see each other, how often you talk. There are variable timelines here. But within the first month or two, you're establishing that, hey, we are both considering this as a long-term thing, and we're going to stop seeing other people to explore this together. Now, once you establish that, that leads us into the first year. I think a big mistake a lot of people make is they think that 30-day benchmark should be the year benchmark. And no, it shouldn't be. Right? So they say, once we're exclusive, once we're not seeing other people, I've locked it down. No, that's not locking it down. And if you treat it like it's locking down, that's going to be received as pressure. So what the first year is about, the first year is about exploring relationship together while considering the possibility of lifetime partnership. So what does that look like? It looks like naming things about the relationship that don't work for you and seeing how the relationship adjusts. It looks like communicating needs, communicating boundaries, communicating standards. It looks like dealing with life situations like time management, other commitments like kids or work or family or different kinds of things. It looks like seeing each other in different seasons, seeing each other under stress. It looks like having fights, but fighting effectively, fighting with kindness, fighting with compassion, fighting with understanding. It looks like dealing with real world problems together and seeing how you show up for each other under conflict. And what I want to say is, you're not doing all of this because you're in a lifelong commitment. You're doing all of this because you're pressure testing the relationship for a lifelong commitment. And that might sound like a subtle distinction, but in terms of how a relationship is experienced energetically, how it's experienced in the body, that is a world of difference. Because there's a difference between, we are in this relationship now, you're tied to it, you have no choice about it, and we are exploring what it's like to be in a real relationship together, so we can decide if this is something we want to choose for life. That sounds like a minor nuance. It is a complete revolution in terms of how the nervous system feels it. And what I want to say is, I'm not saying there's no commitment here. I'm saying there's a moderate level of commitment. And this is something I've addressed for years, is that most people tend to operate like there's zero commitment and there's total commitment. But that's not the way real relationships unfold. Real relationships unfold with moderations of commitment that deepen over time. So we could say, from the beginning, there needs to be a level of commitment where it's just like, I call you. I try to plan dates with you. I try to see you regularly. I try to talk to you. There's a level of commitment that says, I want to see you again. That's a level of commitment. It's not ultimate commitment. It's a level. Then there's a level of commitment that says, I want to only see you and not anybody else. Then there's a level of commitment that says, I'm naming this. You're my girlfriend. I'm your boyfriend. We have a title. We have a significant relationship to each other. Then there's a level of commitment that says, I want to spend my life with you. Then there's a level of commitment where you announce that to the world. Then there's a level of commitment where you keep doing it, even when it gets hard. Even when most couples would get divorced, you work through it. And there's not a total commitment. There's just increasing levels as the safety and the trust in the relationship has developed. For a man, the difference between we're exploring this and you still have the right to choose out of it is completely different than you're mine now and there's pressure for you to stay. Now, I know some of you might hear that and that sounds a lot like, so I'm just waiting around for him to make a decision. No, you're not. But this is the biggest difference. A lot of times we approach relationships as outcome oriented, right? So I'm in this to get somewhere in the future. I'm in this to get married. I'm in this to get lifetime partnership. And so the present moment becomes a means to an end. That's what feels like pressure. That's what disrupts the evolution of the relationship. So you're not just sitting back and waiting around for a commitment, but you're dealing with the present commitment rather than the imagined future commitment. So it's not, is this relationship meeting my lifetime needs? It's, is this relationship meeting my present moment needs? Let me give an example. I remember a real conversation I had with a client. I've had this conversation with many clients, but I remember one in particular where she was talking about how her boyfriend didn't text or call her on a regular basis. And he would plan dates, they would go out, but in between dates, it seemed like there was little communication. And she's like, I want daily communication from him. I want him to text me good morning. I want him to call me. I want us to talk on the phone at night. And I said, okay, then you need to ask for that. So this is the distinction. She wasn't asking him to make a lifetime commitment to her. She was asking him to make a daily commitment to her. Lifetime commitment, he might not be able to accurately promise that in the moment. Daily commitment, that's manageable. So she said to him, I want you to text me good morning every morning, and I want you to call me every night so we can talk before bed. And he said, I can do that. So she wasn't gauging the relationship based on lifetime commitment. She was gauging it on, is it meeting my present moment needs? This is what women need to understand about men. Attraction does not call forth lifetime commitment. Sex does not call forth lifetime commitment. Even emotion and feeling, falling in love, does not call forth lifetime commitment from a man. A lot of times those things do for a woman. A woman is ready to commit when those things are present. Men don't operate that way. A man doesn't commit because he falls in love. A man commits to a relationship that he has invested enough of himself in. So when she made it about present moment commitment, not future commitment, she made it about text me every morning, call me every night. I'm not asking if you can meet my needs for life. I'm asking if you can meet my needs today. And when he starts making that daily investment in her, she's actually training his devotion. He becomes more devoted to the person that he is investing himself into. Now, what happened with me and my wife, we had many conversations like this, and ultimately I got to a place where I wanted to ask her to marry me. She didn't have to push me. She didn't have to nudge me. She didn't have to bring it up. I did that all on my own. It doesn't always work that way. So I want to share an experience of some friends we have. Close friends of ours, they'd been together for about 4 years, and they had a really good relationship. You know, he showed up for her day in and day out. They were living together. Their relationship was solid. But he wasn't moving towards marriage. Now, this is 4 years in, mind you, right? So this isn't early. They've been daily investing in each other. He was devoted. He just wasn't taking the steps she wanted him to take. And she had to bring it up. She had to say, look, we talked early on that if this did go the distance, like we would get married. I feel like we're at that place now. So what's holding you up? And what was really holding him up, it wasn't malicious, it wasn't vindictive, it wasn't manipulative, it wasn't him trying to keep a back door open. It was that he had become comfortable with the routine of things, that he wasn't feeling an urgency to take things to the next level. And she had to name that. And she had to say, I'm not okay with that. That's not the relationship I want to be in. I think we're at the point now where I deserve a ring. I think we're at the point now where I deserve that commitment for us to stand up in front of our friends and family and for you to claim me as your partner. And it was a point of tension between them. But it was also appropriate for where they were in the relationship. Again, she wasn't doing this 6 months in. She was doing this 4 years in. And so it was appropriate for where they were in the relationship. He had been investing himself into the relationship for years. He was devoted. He wasn't leaving. He didn't have a back door. He didn't want to get out. But he had become comfortable with the routine. And so when she had this conversation with him and he ended up talking to his therapist about it and, asking himself, what's my holdup? What is it that I feel like I'm not ready for? And he realized that there was really nothing, that he was ready. Shortly after that, he proposed. They got married. Everything's wonderful. They're together now. Their life is wonderful for them. But I want to share that example because that's not really any different than the client I said who said, text me every morning, call me every night. She wasn't living in a future reality. I want you to promise me everything up front. She was living in the present reality. We are at a stage in our relationship that calls for this commitment, and I feel like we're not stepping into it. So what's up? That was relevant for where they were. 6 months in, she wasn't asking him for a ring. 6 months in, she was saying, I just want to know that we're exploring this like a lifetime thing, that we're exploring this like something that could actually last. So rather than orienting a relationship around future promises, you orient it around present needs. 6 months in, what I need to know is you're not treating this like something casual. I don't need to know that you're going to make a lifetime commitment to me. I need to know that you're taking this relationship seriously. A year in, 2 years in? Yeah, I need to know that you're actually considering that you would want to spend your life with me. If we're 2 years in and you still don't know that you want to spend your life with me, that's a fundamental problem. 3, 4 years in, if you're still not buying a ring, what's up? What more do you need to know at this point? We're dealing with present moment needs, not future orientation. And that's scary. That's scary because we want reassurance. And this is what I want to offer the ladies out there, because there have been a lot of instances where men have promised the world, I want to marry you, I want to spend my life with you, I want to have babies with you. And then they get 3, 4 years in and he backs out. So she got the lifetime reassurance up front, but then it fell empty later on. Because this was a man who was willing to promise something that he didn't know for sure he could keep. And this is why wanting the upfront certainty isn't a good way to go. Even when you get it, it's not necessarily true. But a man who is willing to meet your present moment needs, and he's willing to do that consistently, day after day, month after month, year after year, that is a man who is investing himself in you. See, in the situation I described, here's the difference. She got the upfront promises, but day to day, her present moment needs weren't being met. And so 4 years in, the promises collapsed because he wasn't devoted. He wasn't devoting himself to her day in and day out. And because she had the verbal certainty that she wanted, she didn't think she needed that daily devotion. So she didn't ask for it. A man who actually has integrity is not going to promise you a lifetime 2, 3, 4 months in, because he doesn't really know yet. But here's what you can trust, ladies, and this is the most solid promise a man can make to you. A man who cares enough to meet your needs, to call you, to text you in the morning, to call you at night. A man who cares enough to honor the things that you ask for. A man who shows up to meet you with his daily devotion and consistently does that, not for a week, not for a month, for a full year, for 2 full years. That is more promising than any verbal promise he could have made. And yes, there's risk involved. There's risk involved because what might happen, he might show up strong for a month. He might show up strong for 2 months. By month 6, his devotion might be diminishing. By a year, he's become completely complacent. Love is risky. There are no guarantees. There are no promises. But when you're connected to your present moment truth, not this is what I need in life, this is what I need right now. When you're communicating about that with him, when he consistently steps in time and time and time again, that's how a man demonstrates devotion. That's how he trains his nervous system to be devoted. And that's how a relationship is not experienced as pressure, the responsibility is chosen. You see, when you say, I want you to text me every morning and call me every night. And I want to say, like, you don't have to be a drill sergeant about it. Like, if he's going to a concert, don't call me that night. Just shoot me a text when you get home. Right? Like, you don't have to be inflexible about it. But when you communicate something like that, you're not putting pressure on him. You're inviting him to make a choice. And what it comes down to is, if you care enough about me, if you care enough about this relationship, if this is important enough to you, then you'll want to meet this need. And if it's not, if you say, no, I can't do that, if you say, sure, I'll do that, and then you do it for a week and then you quit, what that man is demonstrating is that he doesn't have the capacity for devotion. And that's how you see the long-term promise. It's not in empty words that he'll tell you just to please you in the moment. It's in the way he shows up for you day in and day out. Every step of the way is not promise your life to me. It's choose me fully and completely today. And if you choose me fully and completely today and tomorrow and the next day and the day after that, and you keep doing that consistently over time, I can reasonably trust that you would continue doing that for life. That's how commitment is created. So, a man pulls away when he feels like his commitment is expected rather than chosen. A man pulls away when he feels that his freedom of choice is threatened, when he is no longer the one directing his life, but someone else's expectation of him is directing his life. That's the pressure that collapses a man's nervous system. Most men are not commitment avoidant. They're just looking for a relational context where their choice is honored, their choice is appreciated, their choice is rewarded, rather than expected. They're looking for someone who's not trying to take that choice from them, but invite them into that choice. And I want to acknowledge, because I know a lot of you ladies encounter this, is that not every man is in that place. Not every man is in a place where he's willing to make that choice at all. And some of them will tell you that right out of the gate. They'll say, look, if you're not up for something casual, I'm not into this. Look, we've been on 3 dates. If you're not going to sleep with me tonight, I'm not into it anymore. Or they'll just ghost you. Right? Some men are going to reveal that very easily. Some men think they're available for it. But then when you start asking them to choose you day in and day out, they wobble. They're inconsistent. Some men rise to the occasion every time. Some men keep trying, and I'm not saying he does it perfectly, but he keeps trying. He keeps showing up. He keeps prioritizing you. He keeps prioritizing the connection. He keeps doing his best to make you feel safe, to make you feel wanted, to make you feel loved. That's where the promise lives. Not in words, but in actions. And not in a single action, but a pattern of action over time. You may request things from him, but he chooses them, not because you pushed it on him, but because he wanted to choose this relationship and choose you for himself. That's the path. So thank you for being with me today. Lots of love and blessings, everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I'll be back with you next week. Take care. See you then. Bye. Thanks again for checking out the show. Please subscribe on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on the most. And I would love it so much if you leave a review and tell people what you think of us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @TheLivingRelationship to connect more closely. And I'm grateful to be supporting you on your journey to love.